So Alex, we were just obviously chatting before, and you said that at these types of events you have people that are here because they either know the book, know your work, or they're just curious about potentially writing. And I just thought we'd start there for if there is anyone in the room who's not really familiar with your sort of backstory. When I was poking around the internet earlier this afternoon doing research on you, there's a fantastic interview in Good Weekend, the two of us, that you did.
Oh, yeah.
Where there was this wonderful story where you were talking about your wife Stephanie, who's in the room this evening, and how you met her when she was 21 and you were 38. And here's a fun fact: the barmaid had to tip a jug of ice water over the pair of you. You were quoted as saying. But the other thing I wanted to ask you about was that the quote was, "I met Steph and got serious about writing. The journey to the books began with her." So I just thought that's a really great place to start tonight. You're 38 years old, you meet the love of your life. What is your origin story as an author? What was it either about her or that time in your life that inspired you to get serious about books?
Yeah, actually working as a stockman in Queensland on a place called Goathlands in the Central Highlands. And I was dead keen to become a sort of active horseman doing the job. I knew how to ride, I knew how to shoe horses, I'd learned that. And he wasn't interested in cattle work, he wasn't interested in the station. He was interested in reading and drinking sherry. What you like to do every evening, and we'd have the fire on. He'd have the fire on in the homestead, and he said, "Oh, Christ, I get yourself a book, I can bloody read." You know, I wasn't a great reader. I'm not one of these people who started reading when they were 3, who found a copy of Montaigne's wonderful sayings under the bed, under the mattress of their mother, and just read it. Yeah, I just read it when I was 3. It was my... No, I didn't start. I published my first novel when I was 50, so I wasn't in a hurry, obviously, and I'm still not in a hurry. Why hurry if fate is against you? Max Blatt said to me a long time ago, "Why hurry if fate is with you?" And I thought, well, I never hurry anyway. So time passes and I can just sit here staring at you for a while and then say any questions. But I think you already asked the question. Yeah, and he encouraged me, rather than it being something like some horrible, scary outback story, what it was, in fact, was I became a reader, and I never met horrible, scary people anywhere. And I worked in the outback for quite a long time, in Australia and overseas, well, in New Zealand, not overseas, but just there. And they were all just really lovely people, apart from being terrible racists, and there was a powerful history there of that kind of thing, and I have written about it in a number of books, 4 Queensland books. So yeah, it began there. When I sort of left working as a stockman and breaking in horses and things like that, I kind of quit because I was unsatisfied by what I was expected to do and the kind of quality of life that I'd struck in reading novels mostly. And I just thought, well, what can I do that I won't get sick of? And I thought maybe I could be like Graham Greene. Of course, you can't be like Graham Greene unless you are Graham Greene. And my students used to say to me, I want to write like Graham Greene. I'd say, but you're not Graham Greene. You're Sheila Schwartz, or, you know. And you've got to write her stories. Graham Greene lived the stories he wrote and knew it, understood it, inside it. Okay, you can make it up, I know, you can lie, make things up. People do, they end up in prison doing that, if it works terribly well for them. But yeah, so I kind of conceived the idea of being a writer, and came to Melbourne, came down south and went to the university, because I felt I needed to get an education, and did, and met some wonderful people there, fortunately, some very good people, and began to write. I was pretty young then, And I didn't really think in terms of publishing a lot of the stuff I was writing. I thought more in terms of maturing my ability to do it and to have something worth offering before I attempted to publish. And I know quite a few people today, and I've had lots of students who've decided to publish within a year of deciding to become a writer. They're frustrated because they didn't get published yet, you know. It really didn't worry me, and I wasn't looking at a kind of career as a writer. And I drank quite a lot and enjoyed life and mucked around. And when I met Steph, as Joanne said, I realised, shit, I got to get serious about this because this is for life. You know or you don't know. I don't know. We knew this is it. And Steph was the same. She was a bit of a nutcase when I met her. But I could see that potentially she was an interesting woman. And we kind of made each other serious. We made each other effective, I suppose. Steph calls it something like getting agency and having your control. I didn't think in those terms, but I thought get serious and work hard. And I've been serious and working hard ever since. And probably too serious, but take it all very seriously, I guess. Sometimes think, what the hell am I doing? Listen up, you know. I can listen up in real life with people, but as soon as I start writing, I start really focusing on what I think of as getting it right. And I kind of forget about being light-hearted. So, I don't know, it's a bit of a trap.
So just doing the maths there, if you met when you were 38 and you said the first book was published at 50, that's 12 years to get it right. Did you have multiple manuscripts that are sitting in a drawer somewhere? Was it the one work you continued working on for 12 years? So what was that process like for you?
Yeah, well, I kind of didn't know what to write. I thought I had to write about the issues of the day, which were things like corruption in local councils and things like that. No. You know, so I did. I wrote serious books about that sort of thing as novels. I didn't realise, even though I'd done an honours degree in literature, I never noticed, which is amazing, that the novels were about the intimate lives of human beings, and that's their speciality. The intimate lives of us is not written about, really. Your interior life is private, and it's inaccessible to biographers, inaccessible to people who write history. And I know a lot of good biographers and historians who I'm very fond of, who write beautifully. We agree, that's where the speciality of the novel is, and why we continue to do it after 2,000 years, whatever it is, because it's our story. And that sense of empathy with a person. People say, how come you write women so well? Well, come on, you know, I've lived with women all my life. My mum was a woman. It's a bit of a coincidence in itself, but Steph's a woman, a daughter, 2 women grandchildren, and there are women all over the place. Look at them here. I mean, without the women, there are 3 men, I think. And I wonder why they're here, because you don't read novels. Men don't read novels. You do? Oh, you do. Go on, anyway.
I've read most of yours.
Kept me busy for a while. Yeah. So anyway.
So what then was your journey to publishing? Because it's one thing to sort of...
I did write a novel.
Oh, you did, right.
I wrote letters for a friend who was a poet, Chris Hemmensley, his name was, and he had a bookshop, wonderful bookshop. He and his wife had a wonderful bookshop called Collected Works. And if you wanted an unusual author, or he specialised in poetry, but if you wanted an unusual author who was writing about literature and that sort of thing, he'd have a copy. He'd say, you'd go into his shop and it'd look vague when you asked for the title, and he'd sort of gradually, like radar, he'd home in on it, there, over there. It wasn't in any order, but he knew where it was. Hand it to you. the look of faint surprise and delight on his face, you know, and you think, hey, you had it, everyone else hasn't had it. So it was a lovely bookshop, a great feeling in that bookshop, and he published in those days we didn't have the internet, of course. When was it? 70s, yeah. And he published a thing which was he'd send around the world posting it twice a year maybe, and it was selected stuff, not necessarily letters. It might be a piece of writing from friends, and he had this wonderful circle of friends. He's English, and he had them everywhere, England, America, here, kind of alternative type people, not mainstream, not commercial writers. One of the reasons why I kind of stayed out of the commercial stream was, I guess, being his influence and the satisfaction of being among these people, which was lovely. And there wasn't a sense of competition or anything like that. It was just, we're writers. And in one of my letters, I wrote to him at length about this creature which we'd hunted in England in the West Country called the Tewington Knot. N-O-T-T is a word that you can find it if you really look in the OED. It's not a prominent word, but you can find it. It's not a lost word, and it means a stag without antlers, which of course the antlers are the crowning glory of the stag in the hunting season, and they are why there's a closed season 3/4 of the year on the knot. It's open seasoned all the time, and the knot is like an outsider and an aberrant creature. And I was an outsider and an aberrant creature. I was well aware of that, and I wrote to him about this knot and the hunt that I went on with him, and it got this fantastic response, this letter, from overseas everywhere. And up till then I had written 3 400-page pre-novels. I'd send them off what I think was finished, and one of them would be about, as I said, corruption in the local government council and things like that. And they'd say, we think you can write a really great novel. I really loved the chapter on sailing. You must have been a sailor sometime. No, I hadn't. But they all were rejected, thankfully, because they were crap. They were just wrong. They were about these issues rather than about the intimate lives of the characters. Writing about the knot, the thing that struck me with the response to that letter was it was such a powerful level of interest. What else? What happened? What happened in the end to the story about the knot? Where is it? How can we learn more? People had been involved, engaged with it. It was very much about the life of the interior, because it was my own life. It was my own interior. I was familiar with it, and nearly all one's works. I mean, James Baldwin, magical, great American writer who I read in my youth, said that all art is a form of confession. And confession is a private, personal thing. It's not something you make up, but it's disguised. Many I can point you to how come I wrote about this or that or one thing or another. It's a disguised form, sometimes self-consciously, and sometimes, very importantly, not at all self-conscious, but even more real and deeper. And your best readers will tell you this. They're the ones who tell you what it is you're really doing. The readers. You don't know what you're doing. You think, I planned this, I'm going to do it. You did. Why did you plan it? Why are you always having these things happening in your books? They dig deeper, the good readers. They realise the thing for themselves. Providing your work is open, providing it isn't closed down by telling them everything, but leaving it open, which of course good writers all do. It's open to the reader, to be shared with the reader. And the reader is the one who realises the story most fully by bringing themselves to it. I visited a prison locally near us in Castlemaine, where we live, and it was the book they wanted me to talk about was called Coal Creek, And it was actually written inside a prison. You don't know this really until the end of the book, I think. I'm not sure. But, and I thought, oh, okay. And they're going to give me hell. These people, they're in the bloody prison. They know all about it. I've never been in prison, only overnight, once or twice. But not the way they are, sort of having lost their freedom and living in some sort of seclusion. But so I went out there and I was fairly worried about it, and they were all women, of course. And there was a woman there who had read all my books and annotated them. And I thought, oh Christ, she's going to trap me with these impossible questions. She's going to know more about these books than I do. Anyway, she did. Well, it's not difficult to know more about someone's book than the writer themselves. It's just a matter of being confident, I suppose. But she said, can I ask you a question? This is after a while. And I said, yeah, of course. And she was quite shy, and she was in there for 7 years, being very brilliant and a crook. But yeah, and she said, I've never commented anywhere. I've read a lot of your stuff on commentary and talking about writing and that sort of thing. You never mentioned the fact that you've got this theme running through your work, the theme of the absent mother. I thought, what? I've got a theme of the absent mother? And she could see the fact that I was a bit sceptical. She went through each book. If she's not actually there, she's dead. Or she's this, or she's that. Or what about that one? What about that one? And that's a form of an absent mother. It's not the absent mother. She had them all, about 5 of them lined up. And yeah, I was told and I understood it totally, that I'd been secretly writing about when I was a baby, virtually 18 months old. I was taken to a little home to be placed there for a week while Mum had another kid, because Dad couldn't get time off work in those days, and Mum had to go into hospital, I suppose. Anyway, off I went for a week. When you're 18 months of age, a week is forever. You go, why am I? It's over. And I still had sort of memories of that. I could remember the cab ride with Dad. I could remember the sort of green shiny tiles of the wall of this place, and a woman sort of pressing my face against it, and I presumably saying to stop screaming at all. And so that's what I'd been writing about. Secretly, I'd been getting that out and dealing with it, because I never talked about it. It was something that, in a strange way, I felt ashamed of. I mean, it's one of the ways in which we understand other people, isn't it? Something awful happens to a person, they feel ashamed. Well, yes, they do. You feel ashamed if something awful happens to you. You may feel angry and desire vengeance and all those things, but there's a kind of shame involved in that happened to you. You were kind of victimized, you were nothing. That's what they made of you. So, I never thought of it like that. I tried to avoid thinking about it. But anyway, there it was. And she told me about that theme of the absent mother, and it made sense to me of a lot of things. Great reader.
So outside of the idea of talking about the interior life of a character, I mean, you've obviously now written, you're prolific, you've had over a dozen books published. Do you have, and obviously when you write a novel, you're signing up to really a couple of years of your own life, aren't you? Because we've got Chat GPT now, but it's not quite writing novels for us just yet. So you still need to sit down and write the book, and that can be a process that obviously can take a year, 2 years, however long it takes to write a book. And then what we're doing right now, then promoting the book, like you're committing to an idea for several years of your life. How do you decide when all these ideas are floating around in your mind, like landing on the story and landing on the characters and wanting to commit to them yourself, but also beyond that, thinking that they're going to have a life that will be interesting to these readers that pay such close attention to your work?
Yeah. How do you meet people? I mean, it's really the question you're saying is, okay, so how do you approach the business of it's an act of faith, after all, to write a novel, because there isn't anything there before you write it. You've got to make it up out of nothing. in a sense. If you're going to design and build a submarine, at least you've got stuff. You know, there are people with expertise who will bring their stuff over to you and plugs in there, mate, you know, and finally you've got this big machine that's put together like Meccano or something. With a novel, you don't have anything at all initially to start with. And I mean, I'm the kind of novelist, and I suppose in some ways, so it reduces the size of my readership, definitely, because I'm the kind of novelist who writes about myself in this secret way, or I write about the interior life. There are no explosions, there are no murders. There is a murder. There's a murder in Love Song. It's not hugely commented on, but it's towards the end of the book, and you wonder why this guy is even there, and he finally stands up and he does this beautiful killing. And I understood what he was doing because I had an aneurysm of the abdominal aorta, so he has a shift which he just sticks into this guy, making sure it's the aorta that he gets. The blood goes to his knees, white as a sheet, and he's dead.
This isn't another one of your confessions.
No, I mean, as the doctor said to me, if it really bursts, you'll exsanguinate within a minute. I said, exsanguinate? That's a verb, to exsanguinate. What's he doing? He's exsanguinating. He's finished, he's done it. Yeah, so your heart just grows crazy to pump the blood out.
Right.
It's losing all its pressure, everything. But what was the question?
How'd you get away with that crime? No.
So there's a sort of quietness.
How you choose your stories.
Yeah, how you choose the story. I think it sort of might sound a bit pretentious, but the story tends to choose you in that. When I think of any of my books, I mean, the Tibbington Knot was one that it was other people who told me, who responded to that letter, and I thought maybe I should write a novel about my own personal experience and stuff, which sounds pretty obvious, but I never thought of it, to be honest. So that's what I did with the Tibbington Knot. I just took, God or whoever did this business, the advanced theory had done it or something ahead of me anyway, I didn't do it. All this detail of people, look at you, to describe you, we have to observe you. We have to in some way become at least familiar with your appearance, and we can take it from there. But those sorts of things are critical to us. There's nothing there. Where are you going to get all this stuff from? Well, it's already there. It's been done. I used to say to my students, for God's sake, don't use your imagination. Well, I don't want to write something that's never been written before. And I said, well, if it's never been written before, it's because it's not interesting. Have some respect for the last 2,000 years of writing. Write the same stuff. You will anyway. There are only 3 stories. One's a love story, one's a murder, and one's something else. I can't remember what it is. But everybody writes those stories over and over and over. But yours hasn't been written, I'd say. You write the story. Whatever it is that appeals to you. If you want to do crime fiction, go read, for God's sake, read some crime fiction, if you want to do that. Because a lot has been done. People who sort of never read, I don't want to read because I get influenced. Like Hughie Menuhin said, I don't listen to other people playing the violin. Like, what? I think he spent his life listening to other people. And all writers gain inspiration from the works of other writers. I have writers whose works I can rely on near me all the time, around me, and when I get up in the morning and go into work, I kind of dread it initially, and I've forgotten how to write during the night, so I pick up one of these books and I open it, and it's a normal, simple sentence. Oh, right, yeah, of course, that's right. It reminds me that there isn't anything special about it, just do it. Don't get carried away with trying to make an amazing sentence. Nobody will read you. Not only a few people, but nobody. So the books come to you in a way, or they have come to me. And Yeah, the stories. I mean, I think Christina said we live in a ocean of story, and really, it's the realization of those sorts of things. Like, I suppose I got something from my dad in that respect too, because he would be sitting there at night with us kids sitting around the fire, and Mum would be darning socks or something, and we'd say, "Tell us a story, Dad." Mum would say, "It's too late for stories now. It's time to go to bed." He'd say, "It's just a wee one, darling. It'll not take long." And he was never lost for a story. He wouldn't say, "Oh Christ, I don't really feel like it tonight. You know, no, I'm too tired. I can't think of anything. Oh, let's just ask me next week." He'd just take your glasses. That's what he'd do. The first thing his eyes landed on, he'd say, "You see your mother's glasses sitting there on that table?" I'd say, "Yeah." "What about them?" He'd say, "You know the fellow who invented those glasses, don't you?" "No." "Neither does he." But it's an act of faith. And it's the same as writing a complex, long, difficult novel. It's an act of faith. You settle on something, and the thing I have settled on, for example, with the Ancestor Game, say many years ago, was that guy, Lang Zu, committed suicide. I loved him. He was a wonderful friend. We had a great and dangerous friendship. And it was Steph who said to me, I'd have a few drinks, and I'd start carrying on about Alan, who's no longer with us, no longer a really good friend. She'd say, "Why don't you write a book about him?" So I did. I wrote The Ancestor Game. So Steph suggested that book, write a book about Alan. Get it off your chest, deal with it. All those sorts of reasons, you know, why a story comes to you, usually because it has a lot of meaning for me. Max Blatt, the story of Max, which is a non-fiction book, he was a guy, I mean, I didn't want to fictionalise Max because he was such a critical, he had such a powerful story, and it was to do with the Holocaust, and I mean, it's only me, other people can do what they like, but I don't think the Holocaust should be fictionalised, and I just don't go along with that, so that's my choice. And so Steph and I went in search of his record, and we found it in the end. And really the book is this journey of finding that he's not there. It's really finding an absence, because he is absent, and so much was lost that it can never be replaced or imagined. And any stories about the Holocaust that aren't fragmentary are wrong. To me, they're wrong, because it's fragments that are left after what happened to the Eastern European stronghold of the Jewish culture. It's gone. It's not there. We know everybody in Poland now who is Jewish, for God's sake. There's only 30 people in Wrocław who are Jewish, and there are a few others somewhere else, but not many. Not many. You can meet them all. Once upon a time there was over 1 million. It was 3 million or something in Poland. I mean, what happened was the end of the world. So you can't have a story like that when you just imagine fitting in the bits that are missing. They're missing. The important thing is it's them that's missing. The silences are more important than the actual noise. And with Max, he was a man of silence, great, deep, beautiful, rich silence, which drew your imagination, drew my imagination as a young man of 21 who wanted to be a novelist. And he believed I could be a novelist. Gave me a copy of Thomas Mann's Dr. Faustus, probably the most difficult novel to understand in my time anyway. But so I started off on that level with Max, who was a gift to me of friendship. And so when I wrote about it, it took us 5 years. We learned German, because we had to write that book. You know, we finished up with the remnant of his family in Israel, and travelled around the world finding the story. And I've always been willing to do that with the Ancestor Game. I said, we've got to go to China. We didn't have any money. So Steph's dad lent us his gold, what's that card, you know, MasterCard, was it? I don't know. It was a card. We never actually used it. We managed somehow without using the card, but we had the card in case, we had the number on it so we could get money. We never actually got money out of it, but it was a lovely reassurance. But yeah, I mean, I haven't just sat at home writing. I've travelled the world searching for, Conditions of Fate is a book that I don't know whether anyone's ever read that one, but it's essentially my story of a kid from South London during and after the war, very poor education, nowhere to go. Dad's Scottish, he's sort of like Billy Connolly, and every second word. What? It's not actually, it wasn't with Dad, but he was an absolute comic, and he was also dangerous in terms of confronting the English horror of being English. There are no English people here. People say to me, "Oh, you poms, you English." Mum was from an Irish background, so I wasn't. The English made it clear that I wasn't English, and so all those sort of hang-ups when you're young, which are not hang-ups anymore, of course, but they're things that help you with your writing, all part of who you are. Who you are is your writing. It's a bit of a trap in some ways. I've reached the point now at my 86. I'm sick of it.
Well, in reading publicity for Max, you wondered if that might be your last book, and clearly not. You've now written A Brief Affair. So what got you out of potential retirement to bring you back for this novel?
Well, I wrote a book called Love Song, in which it's about it started out being about an old writer who decides, that's it, I'm not writing anymore, I've done it. But he sees a story. He senses a story over here, over the world. And he can't not write. What do you do if you don't write? You get up in the morning, you lie back in your chair, and you go to bed at night, and you get up again, and have coffee, I don't know. What do you do? What do I do? He had never learned how to not write. And I hadn't tried to give up writing when I wrote the book. I'd kind of imagined what it'd be like, that he'd be lost totally, and he'd grab for another story and start writing it, which is what he does. He writes the book that we read, I think it's like that, I don't know, I can't remember everything. And when I finished Max, our daughter came she was living in Berlin at the time, she came to stay with us, and we're sitting around the fire, me and Steph and Kate. And Max was done, at the publishers. We've been working on that for 5 years, so we've been this very strong presence. And she said, "What are you going to do now, Dad?" And I said, "I don't know, nothing. I don't know, nothing." We started talking about Steph, her job, when she was working for Victoria Uni at what used to be called the Lunatic Asylum in Sunbury, and it was stopped being called that over degrees at various times. But and Steph was severely haunted while she worked there. And Steph is not a person who goes around feeling haunted much of the time, or even ever, but it really got her there. The ghosts got her. And when I went there to see her in her office, in this solitary, lonely place up in the top somewhere among these dreadful, beautiful slate floors, but hear your feet coming, hear someone coming, and it was, even in full daylight, it was a scary place. And I said to her, "Oh, Christ, I can't bloody work here." She said, "Yeah, no, I'm going to have to move my office. I can't stand it much longer. There's somebody," she'd look around ready to say, "Sorry, what?" And there's no one there, No, there was somebody there, and it was the ghost of whoever had suffered most last or something. And Kate turned to me and said, "Why don't you write a ghost story, Dad?" I said, "All right, I will. Yeah, you can do anything, can't you?" But I couldn't. I wasn't interested enough in the supernatural, and so I started writing this story, which is based on some of that stuff. But it kind of started fitting in with other things that I knew about and other people that I knew about, and then the wonderful gift that you get of a character who you really love and believe in, and you think you made them up because they were there, and obviously you didn't really make them up, because there was a character in that book called Joseph, and I just loved him and believed in him. You know, I feel quite emotional when I even say it. He's just a figment, but he's not. He has a real life, and I kind of know what his background is, but I didn't go into the full story of his background, but I kind of know it. And a little boy called Tommy, he's a character who just arrived fully made who he was with his confidence.
Right.
He knew himself, he didn't need my interference, he was already there. So you get those love, and you know you're on the track of something when those sort of things happen, because it means that there's something going on in your unconscious that's agreeing with this, and it's feeding you, it's responding to your... I mean, writing a novel is always, I think I said, an act of faith, because you start off with nothing. And I started off with Kate's suggestion, and I thought, okay, I'll write a bestseller. I won't write one of these difficult fucking interior books that go on and on about themselves. I'll do a nice, happy, cheerful story. And so I told my publisher, I'm writing you a bestseller. She said, oh good, I like bestsellers. I think it's a bestseller in the bestseller sense, you know. But they're done all right. I can't help going into people and creeping around in there.
The lunatic asylum, for those of you who haven't read the book, sort of looms quite large in the book in terms of characters with their backstories and their current life working, and how that building evolves over time and all the rest of it. Do you do much actual research into... I mean, I know what you mean when you walk through a building like that, you can just feel the history, like you said, and you're clearly a fan of architecture, the way you write about the actual building itself. It's such a vivid... like you can just feel that you're walking through that yourself when you're reading the book. But did you do a bit of poking around and do a bit of research, or do you just rely on that kind of feeling of this would have been horrific in various ways and then let your imagination go from that point?
It's a combination.
Right.
There'll be something there. We went to the, wasn't the State Library, it might have been to Sunbury itself, I'm not sure. There's a library somewhere we went to, and it may be the State Library too, maybe a section of that, where they have the records and papers of Sunbury from way back, and also the sort of drawings, beautiful architectural drawings. So I did look at all that stuff, and didn't get a hell of a lot out of it, but I got some sense of the place and its time from that, because of just the daily routine that people had and the various groups. You know, there was I got all these wonderful descriptions of function. This is the area for mad women, and they wouldn't say for mad women, they'd say there was some statement, I've forgotten, that's in the book anyway, about women who are kind of out of control, you know, they're in there. And their husband's good. Sorry?
Recalcitrant?
Yeah, recalcitrant. You got it. Okay, you must have read the book.
I did.
You're a man, you read the book, and you have a memory. And that's three. But yeah, recalcitrant females, I think, rather than women. And there were sort of 12 were allowed, didn't have to be full. And husbands couldn't put their wives in there for the moment because it's full. Wait till someone dies, there'll be a vacancy. You know, it used to happen all the time. Men used to put their wives away. A lot of women who were there. And when they got the chance to come out, if they did, they'd say, no thanks, been here 30 years, this is my home. And many people really just liked it. Like some people in prison. I know a guy who spent 12 years in Pentridge and didn't really want to come out. Could have come out, had a look, yeah, I'll do something like that. But felt relaxed and at home in there. I know how to deal with all this stuff, you know. And so those sorts of surprising things that I would rather not make them up. Because when you find something real like that, you can rely on it, it's there. A historian friend of mine calls it the trampoline. I used to call it bedrock of facts. He says, well, it's kind of a trampoline. You can jump up, and with your imagination you can go to these other places. You've got to come down again, and boing, there's got to be something there for you to spring off. For me, it's always the facts. And I research the facts assiduously. You know, if I write something about Tunisia, we go to Tunisia, we meet people in Tunisia, we deal with the whole Tunisian experience, and Tunisian people say, how come you knew Tunisia so well? You were only there for a week. But yeah, well, Conrad was in Venezuela for 3 days, and probably the greatest book he wrote was based on that. And someone said to me, you should have stayed longer. He said, no, I may have become an expert. In other words, overwhelmed by far too many facts. The freedom, after all, is there if you're working with a strong impression based on fact. Then you've got a kind of freedom to work within that space. Like you talk about the corridor and the sense of the place being haunted and creepy and all that. Yeah, I mean, not for everybody, but certainly for an outsider like me or like Steph, yeah, horrible. And sort of a chilling atmosphere. Somehow, no matter how much heat you were getting out of the little radiator here, you could never get warm enough. You know, that sort of, as if the chill was imposing itself, had a message in it. There's a message in the chill. That's another title, really, isn't it?
And the character in the book discovers a diary that was kept by one of the patients.
Joseph, didn't it?
Oh, that's right. Joseph discovers it and then gives it to the character. So, sorry, but which is a beautiful way to sort of juxtapose, I suppose, how differently we live between the generations. And like you said, that men can just pop their wives into asylums on a whim back in the day, and thankfully that doesn't happen anymore and stuff like that.
Doesn't it?
Well, I hope not. But again, did you discover, like, is that part of your, like, was there some diary that you came across, or there's some kind of, like you said before about fragments from the Holocaust, did you, in your research of the asylum, find some fragments of diary entries that you then sort of brought to life in that way, or is that entirely fiction in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, fiction is a combination of, I think, anyway, true stories, but the truth of the story is there to be found, and imagination, where you take the story and then things like Joseph and Tommy, who are gifts, they just come into the story and place themselves in there. And the old lady on the hill, I've kind of known them, I guess. I have known such people, especially the lady on the hill. Her name was Ina. Was her name Ina in the book? Yeah, because Ina, the real Ina, is dead, and the model, the person who is also in the book I wrote called The Sitters. And she was the old lady in the garden who was no longer there.
Right.
Yeah, but she was real. And yeah, whatever we were talking about, I don't know.
The diary.
Diary, that's it, the diary. Before Mum died, I said to her, there's this whole mysterious life for us kids. When we were kids, Mum could speak French, she could play the piano, but we didn't have that in our lives. We were poor, working class people, French and pianos and things. And she would swear in French. She never swore in English, just swore in French. So in a sense there was this aura of slight mystery about her and her youth. I said to her, before you die, you just got to write me something, you know. I've fictionalised that a bit as my brother sending me her memoir. Bullshit. The truth is, I asked her, right, do I have to? She said, I said, yeah, you do, Mum. Once you start writing it, you'll enjoy it. And I was like having a cold bath, isn't it? She was very straightforward. And so she wrote me a biography, if you like, of her time in Paris as a young girl. Before she met Dad, before she was thinking of being a wife and a mother and all those things, and her dream of what life might be for her. We all have that, to some extent, before we're sort of detaching from our families, if we're fortunate enough, or unfortunate enough to have a family. Some people struggle to survive their family. You went out that door and you came in this one.
Trying to be sneaky.
Oh, you are sneaky, but the thing about being sneaky is everybody notices. Yeah. It's like leaving things in plain sight. You can start to wreck the place looking for it. And one of them just straightens it up on the way out. And then 3 towns away, they go, oh, that was the fucking thing. By then it's hidden. But yeah, that's another story. These things get written. You're sitting in there on your own. You get up every morning, you go in, and I've had 2 books. Cold Creek was probably the closest to. Well, it's Cold Creek Sitters, which I dreamt on the plane back from America. I was touring over in the States, first Canada and then the States, and I was so tired. I slept all the way, and I dreamt the Sitters. When I got back home, I just sat down and wrote it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a little novella, I suppose. Very personal sort of thing. And with Cold Creek, I was having lunch with a mate in Castlemaine, and I'd finished a book, and it had been published, I can't remember what it was, and he said, the old question, what are you going to do now, you know? And I said, and a very dear friend of mine had just died prematurely. She was in her 50s. I was still in my 70s, you know. She was in her 50s, and she died. Hazel Rowley, a wonderful biographer, a great writer, and she was just about to come over, and we were going to rejoice together, and I was going to do stuff with her to promote her latest book. We didn't do it. And so I said to him, I feel as though I should take the bull by the horns and write something, maybe even a biography of Hazel. And I felt very strongly about that. And I then mentioned this other little story. I said, I've got this other story too, but I'm not going to write it. And I told him, and it was the story of Cold Creek. It was based on the truth of what happened something happened up there. And I said, I'm not going to write it. I need to spend the time with Hazel. And he said, write it as a short story. I said, okay. I'll go home and do that this Saba. And I literally went home after lunch, sat down and started writing Cold Creek. And I didn't stop for 10 weeks, and it was finished. So that was like a gift. Every time I went in the morning to work, I knew it was there. And I'd sit down and said, oh, what's up today? And off I'd go again, you know. Every day I just wrote, and it didn't get edited. When my editor saw it, they said, yeah, lovely. And then nothing was changed. So that's rare. I mean, I'd like that to happen every time. Fun, you know, but... and the other one that was kind of like that was the overwhelming presence of the voice of Autumn Lang, which decided on the book. I didn't decide on the book, she did. She changed my whole plan, totally. And I just followed her all the way through. Of course, a lot of work. I didn't do any research for Cold Creek. I just wrote it.
Right.
Boom. I kind of knew it. Somebody told me roughly something that was close to that story, or like that story in tone and mood. And I thought, I know what to do. But Autumn Lang, of course, took a lot of background. I mean, but I had a lot of background in Australian art of the period of Heidi, and I knew Heidi, I knew the people there, and used to be a good friend of Barry Reed's who sort of inherited Heidi for his lifetime and all that, and got there and do the garden with him and things. So there was just I brought a lot to it, but she changed it. I was going to write about Nolan in a fictionalised form. I found out he was such a mongrel that I just couldn't. I'm not good at writing about nasty people. That is definitely one of my shortcomings. I'd like to be able to write about nasty people. I just can't. I start liking them. Not so bad. No, there's a reason for this. Well, they say understanding is halfway to forgiveness. But yeah, so you kind of enter into the person's life and you think, boy, what happened to you? It's no wonder you're a dog. You know, doesn't mean to say they're lovely people, but they are understandable and they change. And I just can't write about the really nasty people. I couldn't write about a murderer, for example. I mean, not all murderers are nasty, I suppose. They might just kill someone on the spur of the moment and decide, I've got to kill you. And there's a handy implement or something, I don't know. These things happen in a weird and wonderful way. Terrible, really. Nothing like that ever happened yet to me. But, and I don't want to start imagining stuff like that. It doesn't work for me. But Autumn Lane took over. Boom. This is what we're doing. We're not doing that thing that you suggested. And really, with he was so. You might ask, and people have asked me, how come you write women so well? Well, one reason is because they're the same as me. I think we're 98% of our DNA is the same as a chimpanzee. That's for men and women. That's humans versus chimpanzees. And I think 99.9, is that my phone? Yours?
I thought I turned it off.
No, that's okay. Don't worry about it. It's too late now anyway. You're going to have to ask a question in a minute. It'll be your turn.
Make it work.
Make it work.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Should you be first?
We were saying before, it takes a bit of courage to stand up in a... If I'm doing this as an audience, I like to be totally anonymous. I want to be picked on. You know. It's true for everybody. You leave the front seats empty usually, and finally you get forced to sit there because there are no others. And the reason is you don't get picked on. You know, even eye contact can be troubling. You know, just get on with your spiel. Not looking at me.
Well, on that, maybe we should throw open questions to your three here.
We haven't really started yet, actually. We want to know.
Alex, when you were talking about Max, you were talking about we. And I'm thinking that that's maybe you and Steph collaborating.
Yeah,
so can you talk a little bit about how you collaborate?
Absolutely, yeah. Steph and I are very different. We're a complementary couple in the sense that we sort of complete each other. And Steph was the head of the Department of Management, for example, at Victoria Uni when she was there. Not all the time, but at a certain point in her career.
So she's Fran.
I mean, pardon?
She's Fran?
No, not really. Fran is very much herself and a very, very different person to Steph. And Steph did used to go to China. But the collaboration with Steph on Max was critical because it was like having a super helper. For example, when we first discovered the archive of the letters in the Bundesarchiv in Berlin, you probably haven't read the book, but I mean, it's a 1933 cache of letters, which was just the first time I'd found what Max said about himself was true. Before that, setting out to explore him and his record, I had the fear maybe he made it up. Maybe he wasn't who he said he was. He was. And these collection of letters from 1933, the year Hitler took power, became Chancellor, and these letters were only available on microfiche. I don't know if you've ever used microfiche. Microfiche is a horror, pure horror. It's a thing, you look at it like that, you're looking in there and there's a roll of film in there and it's tiny, tiny, tiny. and you touch it, and everything changes. And you're supposed to find somehow among these 150,000 letters from all these different people, you're supposed to find these 12 letters. And everything's in German. We studied German, we learnt German. Steph is still learning German. I gave it up after it was useful to have a useful level of being able to communicate with archivists and people and know what they were talking about, and then we would be able to respond meaningfully, I hope. But anyway, but things like that would be, I don't think I would have ever got those letters, because I'm just not very good at that sort of thing, and I will weaken at a moment like that. Look in there and you think, fucking hell. There's one. Where? It's gone already, moved, you know. A little movement, and there's 50,000 things have gone past. It's a terrible thing, torture. They've found all of this. That's one thing. That's a practical thing. On the level of support, enthusiasm, and all those sort of things, of course, Steph is 120% with me in my writing. She was, in a sense, as I think I already said, the cause, completion of, if you're going to do this writing, get on with it and really just settle down and do it, you know. Whereas before I've been mucking around a bit, and I mean, I'd written plays, and I had a play done at the MTC, that kind of thing. It was stupid because it was rubbish, it wasn't any good. I'd published short stories, but you've got to do it properly. You know, you're going to take it seriously or not. So I did. But Steph was the person whose presence in my life made me take it seriously, and then she brought to it this incredible, and she still brings this in her activities with other people to them. I mean, the amount of money Steph has raised through for charities and things like that is awesome. People say, oh, you can't do that, it's going to cost too much money. She says, well, we'll give it a go. We can't do it if we don't do it. Let's do it. And she'll do it. I would never do that. I would never go near it. You know, just that sort of thing horrifies me. Steph will do it. She suffers, but she will do it. And same with the books. And the help is also involved in, say with a novel, for example, my ideal is that when I give Steph the manuscript, she's my most important editor, has become that over the years. Wasn't initially, of course, because she still had children and a job and was too busy. But since she gave up when she was 55, gave up work and really worked for me and wanted to. And she'll read the manuscript, and if I don't hear for a few days, okay. My ideal is that she'll walk downstairs in her dressing gown, having been unable to put it down, holding it to her breast, tears running down her. Nah. I would remember and probably quote that 3 days or so after she's had it, we'll be having coffee somewhere, and she'll say, by then the manuscript has reappeared on my desk without comment. She'll say, the thing with that book is, it's not the book you've been talking about. Things like that, which really sum up something to you that's critical. And you realise that it shines this light on it, says, no, you haven't got it yet. And the word yet is there for me, because I'll just redo it. I mean, why try publishing something that isn't right yet? Then you'd only have to think of another book to do. Is that going to be right? Are you going to hang in there and deal with it properly? So all those sort of things keep me on the straight and narrow, and I think also it's complementary in the sense that I have retained the ideal that Max Blatt gave me, which was this can be an honourable pursuit. And there's something about that, whatever it means to you, or what it's supposed to mean, it's it kind of made it possible for me to know that someone of Max's understanding, intelligence and education and background would believe that being a novelist could be an honourable thing to do. So it kind of is a bit of fallback for me, that still think of him when I write a book. Would he admire it? I don't want to write something he wouldn't like. So there's a kind of value there. And it's the same with Steph in that sense. And Steph knows everything I've written. And she put together a book called The Simplest Words, which is a collection that was published a few years ago, I think it's about 8 years ago now, of short pieces of mine, and some unpublished and some previously published stories and things like that. And she's just put together another collection of my letters, so the first ever collection of letters. But it's not just a matter of a bunch of letters, it's actually, the way she's done it is, it's a story, an unfolding of the books and other things through there, which she's lived with, you know, all that. And she's put all that together, and that'll be published around Christmas, I think.
Thank you.
So yeah, the answer to your question, our daughter says, for God's sake, whatever you do, don't ask Dad a question. I mean, yes, I have. Not possible.
Anyone else daring to?
You haven't asked your question yet.
How do you know that Darren? He's the one.
I'll ask.
Darren.
Yeah.
Two men
That's right.
in the front row.
Ask
Ask me questions.
It's not a coincidence, yeah.
I'm never going to forget this evening.
Trouble is, I kind of thought of a couple of questions and you sort of answered them already, but
Right,
I was just thinking about writing and how all-encompassing it must be. And I was thinking about, I think it's George, I think that's how you pronounce it, from Conditions of Faith. He's talking to his wife Emily about building bridges. And there's that great passage where he goes into so much depth about the intensity of the experience. Is that a bit like writing, in that it's so all-encompassing and you have to forget about everything else for a while?
Don't have to forget about everything else, you just do.
You just do.
And I'm afraid with me, I've been doing it now so long and so all-encompassingly, to use your very good phrase about it, that I'm bloody sick of it at the moment.
It takes a lot of work.
But yeah, and I feel in some ways, I mean, I mentioned to an American friend who's also, he's a friend because he was an admirer of my work originally, and he used to be the head serang at Vassar College over there, and we travelled together whenever we could. And I told him the other day, so I think, Ron, I think I have wasted my life. I should have done something else. Look what I did. I wrote these bloody books. And he wrote me this beautiful letter about why I hadn't wasted my life. You know? Yeah, so.
Are you serious?
About what?
Seriously thinking you'd wasted your life?
For the moment, I did, yeah. No, I mean, the thing is that you have, I think it's, I remember this woman who was not the headmistress, but what do you call it, the next one, the vice principal, the person who does everything, is responsible for everything in a school, great big woman, big one. And her life was the school, absolutely. And I was slinging off at somebody in the school who I thought pathetic. And she took me aside, as it were, and said, not everyone has your choices, Alex. And it really stopped me in my tracks. I don't think I've ever done that again since then. You know, I thought it was a wonderful, simple way of putting it. He doesn't have no choices, you know. If you were him, okay, so maybe you would do that, but he's not going to. He's going to buckle, because that's the way it is for him. It's beautiful. Really, very complex thing, but very beautiful and simple too. So I'd like to thank her for, I think, in sort of partly continuing to develop one's empathy, I guess.
Further questions?
What was it? You asked a question. Anyway, you got the answer. That was your answer.
It was
Whatever.
a bit short, that one.
Your name's Darren.
Yes.
See, I never forget a name. It's only like 10 times a day. Yeah. I remember your name, Joanne, because I've seen it in writing often.
Ah, there you go. Thank you for buying the age.
Last chance for questions, anyone? Anyone?
All right, well, I'll finish with one final question now. Are you working on anything right now? Is there another?
Yeah, I'm working on a thing that makes me feel sick of it.
That's right, okay. Do you think you'll finish it?
God willing.
Okay. Can you give us any little hints as to what it might be about?
Well, I think now, Steph says, I was telling her about it the other day and how stuck with it I was. She said, you're trying to work on the suspense, because it's called The Deal, and it's based on two things. One is kind of the deal that we all get at birth. We all get a deal. But he had a rough deal. She had a rough deal at birth, you know, or she had born with a silver spoon, or those sort of things. And it's also this guy who's a collector, and he was a painter, he was an artist, and it's based on Lang Tzu, the guy who was the main character in the Ancestor game, which probably people none of you are old enough to have read that, but or silly enough, probably. But so it's I'm working on that, and it's the truth. In that book, The Ancestor Game, he lives. And people who knew the real person on whom it was based wrote to me and said, you brought him back to life. Thank you. And I thought, well, I wrote it because I couldn't bear to have him being dead all the time. And it's always all the time, isn't it? You know, it's not sort of, oh, well, you finished with that now, you've done that, the death thing, you're coming back. No, not going to even say anything, no comment, is that it? So I hate you. But I'm dead, I'm helpless. I hated him initially for killing himself. This guy shot himself. This is the real story. This is the true story. And I don't like writing it, but I'm writing it anyway. Because it's also become what Steph said, you're starting to concentrate on the slightly sensational event towards the end of the book when the deal that they do, this art deal, which is a crooked deal. When they do that, there's a lot of suspense involved. You're not just writing it anymore, you're concentrating on the suspense. It's a book about friendship. I think, oh, you're right. Of course, I relax because you get caught up in something, and your vision becomes sort of narrower and more concentrated on that thing. You're forgetting, and so that's another of the support mechanisms that are working between Stephanie and I. Is she'll bring it back to, well, you've gone astray. There is suspense there, but it's there anyway. You're sort of concentrating on trying to make it a thriller now or something, you know. No, it's not a thriller. You don't write thrillers. It's a book about the limits, in a sense, of friendship. So, and also it has family in it. And there's a baby. I've never had a baby character before, but this is a brand new baby. And it just comes out. I mean, I know babies. We've had two, and they become big, strong, stupid, very expensive, very close friends who we love. But yeah, they were babies, and so I thought, as a baby in this story, it's not just gratuitously present. It's not just a baby and then the baby's in bed, it's asleep, okay, everything's cool. No, it's not. Everyone's on edge. When's he going to wake up? Turn that down. What'll I do now? I've got freedom. Yeah, it's going to wake up. And so on. You're never getting freedom again. When are you going to realise it? So there's all that going on, and there's the fact that, you know, which I hadn't intended to write, that having the baby there, it changed everything, because the woman who has the baby, she gets something, but she loses something. And I read two wonderful books about that for Conditions of Faith. The man over here is reading Conditions. Gerard, see, I never forget a name. And, One of them is called Mother Love, Mother Hate. The Power of Maternal Ambivalence. It was written about 25 years ago. It's not just a fashionable current thing saying, oh dear, it's not all women's weekly pink and blue, it's something else, you know, which we knew anyway because it's been around women who, Steph in particular, who her first baby, it was bewildering. And for me it wasn't. I would just pick him up and carry him around. He could scream his head off all night. It didn't worry me. It pained Steph to the soul. That, you know, so all these differences changed the atmosphere. It changed us for life. A baby, so people have it on the back, they say a dog is not for Christmas, a dog is for life. Is that? Dogs don't live that long. Babies do. And my son is older than I was when I had him, you know, so it happens, it's still around. Thank God. But time to go.
Almost.
Yeah.
Well, Alex, you've had a long and fascinating life, and as readers, where it's a treat that you put so much of yourself into your work. A brief affair is like, in the same way that you described the deal, it's about a brief affair, a love affair, but also the fact that life, there's a line in there that life is a brief affair. It's been a pleasure chatting to you. I encourage you all to buy a copy of the book and you'll sign it, is that correct?
Thanks, Joanne. You mean chatting to me? You had a chance to say something?
We'll rendezvous again. I'll get a word in there.
Yeah, well, you can be the one. You can talk about your work, and I'll ask you a question.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us this evening. And we can all
It's been a pleasure.